Hello, and welcome to Unlearning Silence, a podcast about mental health, trauma, and neurodivergence from a lived experience. My name is Danica. Before we begin, I want to share a gentle content note. This podcast discusses mental health, diagnoses, trauma, neurodivergence, and related experiences. Please take care while listening. You're always free to pause, step away, return when it feels right for you. And above all, look after yourself. I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not here to give advice. What I share comes from experience that I've had myself and reflections from those experiences. I support people seeking professional care that feels right and safe to them. Now let's begin. Now I spoke about my experience before I had a name for bipolar. And I want to continue on that narrative. With all honesty, I thought I had this episode recorded, set, all sorted. But I've had a couple of experiences in the last few weeks that have reframed this part of my life a little bit. I was going to discuss what it looked like going through a manic episode from my experience. But I'm not 100% sure now what I went through was a typical manic episode. It's never quite fit, but I've never really questioned it. And that's something I'll unpack with my therapist next appointment. But I thought it was important to come back and re-record this episode just because what I recorded didn't have quite the same feeling, didn't hit quite the same. But I still think it's important to talk about this part of my life. So I got diagnosed. I had a name. I was clear on it. I had my medication. All was going to be all right in the world. And that's not how it worked. Gave me a name, but it didn't rewrite the past. It really didn't give me much understanding. Gave me a bit of a new lens to look through, and I could look back on stuff a little bit different. But it wasn't until later down the track that I really started to understand a key part of having a mood disorder like bipolar. I had a therapist years later tell me bipolar is part of who you are, but not all of who you are. It didn't quite hit me right at that minute. It wasn't a light bulb aha moment. But quite quickly after that, say in the next week or so after it was said, it kind of just marinated, for lack of a better term, in my mind, and I started to think about it more. That bipolar is part of me, but I don't have to let it be the only thing that I am. I'm still a lot of other things other than just being a person with bipolar. So along I went, taking my medication. I was warned the first month would be difficult, and it was. It was intense, it was disorientating. Honestly, it was a blur. After my diagnosis, I embraced the medication, but I was still in a bit of denial. I followed the treatment. I took what was prescribed. but emotionally I still resisted. I wanted nothing to do with being that person. If I took medication, it was going to be fine. And as we know with mental health, that is not how it works. I tried to keep it this little corner, something to be managed, something to be treated, but not to acknowledge it and integrate things into my life. And for a while it worked. I thought, great. Now this is when my mind has reshaped a little. So first, what has been termed to me as my manic episode after my diagnosis. I'm going to still term it as, I'm just going to call it an episode, because it wasn't a manic episode in the traditional sense of, if you research bipolar, what you'll hear. There was no grandiose ideations. There was no... It wasn't big and no sleeping and I am king of the world type thing. For me, it was more on the lower end. It was, I'm worthless. Nobody wants me in their lives. They're all just pretending. They're just pretending to want me in their life so that I'll just leave them alone. And I couldn't get enough sleep. Like, I was in bed for 12 or more hours and I was exhausted and I still felt like I hadn't slept. So, in this traditional sense, and when you do a bit of research, what I experienced wasn't quite what you'd term as a manic episode, but it was severe and it was full on. So, coming into that, I didn't see things climbing at the time. I didn't see warning signs when I was in it. But it wasn't sudden. I knew for months that there was something happening. There was this pressure building up. But I didn't really pay attention to it. I knew there was something coming. Even at the time, I was already starting to reach out to try and find some supports, but living in a regional area of Australia, the supports are very minimal. There's not a lot out there to be accessed. So I was having trouble getting hold of people and accessing different services. And then it all imploded. So I knew it was happening. I think a big way to explain it is I felt amped up, but it was angry. So I was angry at everything. I was stressed. Every little thing had just set me off. And when it imploded, it just literally imploded. It just all came out. It was messy. It was angry. It was bad. I said things and did things that I would never be able to take back today. It was scary, and I spent a whole week not functioning. I depended on family members to make sure I got out of bed, that I ate, and that I showered. They were my key aims for every day. Get out of bed, have a shower, get dressed, eat, get changed again, go to bed. The bare minimum. And I was relying on my family to help me with that. And I'm so thankful for the support of a few family members and select friends who held me up during this time and in the aftermath. I spent at least a week just not being able to function. I had full body shakes. I couldn't really understand what was going on in my own little world, but yet I had a huge clarity of what was going on, but I couldn't change it. It was a bit of a dissociation that I had. I was just talking to one of my daughters about it today. It was like I was a passenger in my own body. I could see it happening. The whole time was thinking, don't do that, don't say that, or whatever was happening, but I couldn't stop it. And it was, well, I keep saying it, but it was scary. It was so scary. But to have the few select people standing next to me, holding me up, it meant a lot. And it quite possibly saved my life. So when I sort of started coming out of that, back up a little bit. A little bit more of all of this. So all of this was happening. And we're all out of our depth. I had no idea how to react, what to do. I was in the middle of this crisis, and none of my family, none of my friends, they had no experience with it either. So none of us really knew what we were doing. So I think I was probably day 3 or 4, and I said to my mum, take me to hospital. So off we went. The local regional hospital. As I said, live in a rural area. And it was not the best experience. Triage was amazing, I will say, COVID times, and we were triaged outside, which was an experience. But they got me into triage, out of triage, treated me with the utmost respect. There was no children in emergency waiting room at that point, so they sat me in the children's waiting room so I could have some privacy. The doctor, on the other hand, was not so understanding. He saw me in the waiting room, would not take me in. He went and got a script for me. He did a prescription for my understanding, a sedative to help me sleep. I told him it was not likely to work because I'd had similar things before and they didn't work. He told me that was all he could do, and he sent me home. My memory's probably a bit fuzzy on it, but that was the general idea. He told me he had done a referral to it's called the CAT team. So I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's acute mental health. What the reality was, he may have filled out the paperwork, but he didn't file it properly. So that referral didn't go through. So it was an eye-opening experience, and I don't wish to repeat that. I've got a few things in place now that will hopefully mean that I never have to do that. But I've got more information now. But sadly, my experience is not a one-off. It's not an outlier. In rural settings, doctors, especially emergency room, who are quite often registrars. They're locums, they're travelling in and out, and they don't have the knowledge to handle this sort of thing. So it was pretty full on. And in the middle of it all, as I was coming out of it, I was lucky I found a nice GP, because mine was on maternity leave. So as quite often happens when I go through things, they've got one reason or another to be away. It's always valid. So I saw this GP and he was very good. He gave me some coping resources, I should say, not coping. They were resources, and fixed up my medications for what the CAT team had put in place. But I don't really, I guess it was a light bulb moment. It's just this epiphany that if I didn't change how I approached this, then it wouldn't change. The reaction wouldn't change. So if I didn't put any work in to change the way I think about bipolar, then it would happen again and again and again. And did I want this to be my life? A never-ending cycle of this. And I realised that it wasn't going anywhere. That all I had done was push it down and try and lock it up, but eventually it would come out again. And that awareness was pretty confronting, but I realised that I couldn't keep locking bipolar away, and the best way to live with it was to understand it. So that's when I opened up to the idea of seeing a psychologist. And it's also the time in my life that I discovered meditation and mindfulness. Now, I didn't go into either to find quick fixes, not to find cures, but I went into exploring these options as complementary medication. I'm going to really mess this up. Complementary to my medication. So instead of take the pills and walk away, yes, I took the pills, but it was also taking that time to check in with myself. Just see how I was going. Have that person to talk to who I could say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And they could give me some strategies to talk through it and work out what might be triggering that. And that shift didn't happen overnight, but it marked the beginning of a different kind of relationship within myself. A relationship with myself that was outside of the medication. It was a self-care at a very fundamental level of, if I don't take the time to look after me, then I'm not going to be able to be here for anyone else. I was not going to be able to function, to be there for my loved ones. Yes, sometimes I'd be fine, but I knew if I didn't deal with everything, if I didn't have strategies, if I didn't do the hard work, that I wasn't going to be much use to anyone in the long term. So I dove into research. To those people who know me, they understand that for me, knowledge is power. If I want to know something, I dive in and I will research the hell out of it. So I learnt as much as I could about bipolar. I checked my research with both my therapist and GP to make sure that I was on the right track, that I wasn't just going down a rabbit hole of fake information. And what you need to realise is understanding is layered. I'm still learning. And this was, 4 or 5 years ago? So it's something that you can't know it all, especially as a non-medical professional. Like, I can know bits and pieces, and then I lean on the mental health professionals that have a deeper understanding so that they can support me, but I can understand the basics of what they're talking about. And that in all of that, my acceptance has grown over time. It's just really developed into something that it feels natural now. That progression of understanding and looking after myself. So my diagnosis didn't erase my past. It helped me understand it. But acceptance didn't come straight away. That acceptance unfolded through experiences, one of which was quite traumatic, quite significant. But without that, I wouldn't have come to the realizations that I have come to now. And learning to live with bipolar, to start with, when I was diagnosed, my brain, I thought, I'm fighting against my brain. There's something wrong inside of my brain. I need to take this medication to suppress it, and I need to get on with my life. Let's control this beast and let's push past it. But that's not how it works, because that's all that did was stuff it down into a box, and eventually that pressure of trying to stuff that away gets too much. And instead of controlling it, I've found it's better to work with it. So bend it and guide it instead of pushing back. Instead of pushing it away and trying to stop that roll of emotion, I've found it easier for me to guide that emotion gently away, to divert its energy. And that's taken a lot of time and self-awareness to get to. And what I'm saying may or may not make sense to anyone else, but it's the best analogy I've got at the moment. But it's getting there. It's a work in progress, and every day I learn something new about it. So thank you for spending some time with me. If anything in this episode stirred something up for you, please take care of yourself in whatever way feels right. That might mean resting, talking with someone you trust, or reaching out for professional support. For anyone who might feel a little bit broken, that's okay. And you're not alone. How you understand your own mind and your own experience is okay. And that understanding is one step at a time. And half the battle is often knowing that you're not alone. There's others out there that might feel not the same necessarily, but similar. And take solace in that and look after yourself. This has been Unlearning Silence. I'll see you next time.